I grew up in a small town in Ohio. Halloween was a big thing there. Unlike the other kids who went trick-or-treating or attended those generic house parties with apple bobbing and musical chairs, me and my buddies did the scariest night of the year in our own unique way. But in the year of 1985, we didn't know that Halloween night would end in the way that it did. I met my best friends Josh and Ben on the corner of Westview Place, and we went through everything for a few minutes, then did a quick checklist. Once we were happy, we cycled to the northern part of town. There were a lot of people out, and we waved to a few kids from school, but as I said before, we weren't interested in what they were up to, we had our own agenda. It took about 15 minutes until we got to Cedar Hills, which was the rich side of town, and the houses became further and further apart. Eventually the trees turned into forest and I knew we were getting close. It was only a matter of time before we saw those ancient gates that always groaned when we opened them, and the excitement grew. As we turned a corner and passed a small farm, Josh came to a stop and got off his bike. He gestured to be quiet and slid one of the gates open, letting us through before he promptly closed it again. The cops were extra vigilant on Halloween, and we didn't want to advertise that we were sneaking onto what I presume was private property, even though nobody had lived there for years. We cycled up the long winding driveway and then we finally arrived at our destination. The dilapidated Hoffman house loomed over us like some demonic entity from a horror movie, and this year it was my turn to go inside. Funnily enough, I hadn't felt nervous about it before then, but seeing the dark behind those windows, and hearing the wind blow through the empty rooms and hallways really sent shivers up my spine. I asked Ben to recount his experience going inside the previous year, and I nodded my head as he began to explain. But I wasn't really listening, I was just trying to stall going in there. Josh caught on to that, and asked if I was ready and had my flashlight, then patted me on the back. I sighed and said it was nice knowing them, then walked towards the house and up those creaky steps. The heavy door was always unlocked, and it opened with relative ease. That musty old smell hit me as soon as I went inside. Autumn leaves were scattered all over the floor and empty beer bottles sat on the windowsills. There was a stack of old clothes in the corner and some candy wrappers randomly placed on top of them. We heard stories that people sometimes came here for parties, and that homeless men and women would stay here from time to time. That was pretty evident tonight. I turned on my flashlight and walked through the main hall. The floorboards really did creak with each step, and the whole house made groaning and creaking sounds. I shined the flashlight up the first case of stairs and took them one at a time as there were holes in some of the steps and I really didn't want to get my foot stuck in one of them. Ben had told me that the house got progressively creepier as you went further into it, and I tried my best to not think of the story about people seeing Lady Hoffman's ghost in one of the bedrooms that I was approaching. I'd looked at a crudely drawn map of the first floor and remembered that you had to walk through it to the next set of stairs, which meant walking past all of the bedrooms, including the ghostly one. It was about that time that it felt apparent that I really was trespassing. I felt suitably uncomfortable and way beyond scared. Ben was right about the first floor. It was creepy, with disintegrating walls, and it also smelled weird, like a combination of rotting meat and metal. It wouldn't have surprised me if anything had died up here, though I didn't fancy investigating any of the rooms to look for a body. It was darker in this part of the house, and there was no evidence that anyone had been up here lately, not like downstairs. Without thinking, I accidentally shined the flashlight into the supposed Lady Hoffman room. It was the last bedroom on the right. Even though I was scared, I kept the flashlight moving around that room, maybe just to prove to myself that there was no ghost, only old furniture and a decaying four-poster bed. It was only when I turned around to head up the next set of stairs did I get goosebumps. In my mind, Lady Hoffman's ghost was about to come out of the bedroom and chase me up to the attic. Needless to say, I ran up those steps pretty fast. I didn't see a ghost chasing me though. I was in the attic, which meant that I could finally participate in our own unique Halloween tradition. I had to walk to the window, which was at the front of the house, and look through it, then make a signal with the flashlight. I could see Josh and Ben far below me, on the grass outside. Josh had his camera ready and took my photo, then put his thumb up. That photo would eventually go into an album that his brother kept, and in turn his brother's photo was also in there, as were his friends. They had started this tradition some years ago. You see, the Hoffman house scared the heck out of most people, and while some claim to have set foot on the property, or even ventured inside, we went one better and actually went all the way to the top, with photographic proof. It was a test, a rite of passage, and when that photo album was passed round at parties and gatherings, then everybody knew that you had courage, and that you were a somebody. Doing it on Halloween night just turned the risk factor up a notch. I turned away from the window, and I was about to celebrate that my mission was complete, when I heard a crash from somewhere below. I looked back out the window and saw that Josh and Ben hadn't moved, so it definitely was not either of them. I wondered for a moment if I had just imagined that sound, but then I heard it again, and this time it was accompanied by a scream. My heart began to pound. I looked out the window and signaled with the flashlight for help. They signaled back, but I didn't know how they were supposed to know I was in trouble. There was another scream from downstairs and a scuttling noise. Something bad was happening down below, and I really didn't want to see what it was. I couldn't climb out the attic window, it was too high and there was no ledge or anything to hold on to. That meant I'd have to go through the house to escape. My mind raced with a million ideas of what was going on the first floor, but I tried to block those thoughts out and inched towards the attic door. I slowly crept down the stairs and tried to remember the layout of the first floor so that I could quickly get through it. I winced as my foot hit a creaky floorboard, and then I saw a woman in one of the bedrooms. She screamed and told me to get out of the house and call the police. This woman looked pale, and part of her dress was red. As hard as I tried, I was just in too much shock to reply to her. I just stood there dazed. But when she shouted at me to turn around, I did so just as the creature lunged towards me. It was lightning fast, and without the lady's warning then I would have been dead that second, but I managed to duck just in time as it came out of the opposite bedroom. My mind didn't have time to process what this thing was. It dived over me and crawled on the ceiling for a moment, just like an insect, then it landed in the bedroom that the lady was in and hissed at me, a real animalistic noise. Acting on instinct, I leaped back into the empty bedroom and slammed the door shut. I dragged an old table and pushed it against the door, then looked around the room with the flashlight, and was horrified to see holes in the wardrobe, the ceiling, and the floor as well. A powerful arm burst through the wall and moved erratically, desperately searching for me, and I jumped back. I saw that the fingers were pale and long, each one ending in a sharp claw. Part of me had still hoped that it was only a man, but I knew otherwise now. The arm disappeared out of the wall and I heard that scurrying noise again. It would be looking for another way in. I ran to the window, but this one looked out to the back of the house, so I couldn't see my friends, and although I was on the first floor, it was still way too far to jump down. I backed up and tried to think clearly. All I needed to do was make it outside and get to a phone box to call the cops, but I didn't have long, and the room wasn't secure. I tried to get my head together and kept thinking about the motto that my friends and I had. No ocean too deep, no mountain too high, mess with us and you will die. This wasn't a time to feel sorry for myself. This was survival. My mission was to get out. If I had a weapon in hand, then that would help. In the movies, there were a few ways to kill vampires. And yes, I admitted to myself that it was a vampire that I faced. There was sunlight, holy water, crucifixes, and wooden stakes. Now I was out of luck with most of those, but there was plenty of broken wood on the floor, so I took a piece and tried to sharpen it as best I could, rubbing it against the floor until it wasn't quite as blunt as it was before. The house had been deadly silent for a few minutes. If I opened that door, then the vampire would run me down in seconds. I decided to go through the hole in the floor. It wasn't quite wide enough for me, but with a little work then I'd be able to fit my shoulders through, then I could jump down and I'd be on the ground floor. I knelt down, put my stake and flashlight to the side, and began to tear small pieces of wood from the outside of the hole. This was surprisingly easy, and after a few minutes, it was just about wide enough, but I was quickly distracted by a scratching noise. At first I thought it was rats or mice, but then it became much louder. It was only when small pieces of debris fell from above that I looked up and saw it there. The vampire had been clawing its way through the ceiling, only a few feet above my head. I screamed and half-heartedly moved the stake towards it, but it didn't react. It only tried to get through the ceiling quicker. I was about to jump through the hole in the floor when I suddenly remembered the woman. How could I have forgotten her? I was certainly no hero, but I couldn't leave her. The vampire was in the attic above me. I maybe had 30 seconds or so. I grabbed my flashlight and stake, then opened the door and quickly moved across the hall. In the other bedroom, the woman lay on the floor, as white as a ghost. I nudged her and she was as cold as ice, then her eyes suddenly opened. She didn't look human anymore. She hissed at me with giant fangs and I backed up to the door. She screamed and put her hands over her mouth, her eyes looking momentarily human again. "Get out," she cried. "Get out before it's too late." That was enough for me. I slammed the door shut and ran down the stairs to the ground floor. The only problem was that I forgot that there were holes in the steps, and my foot went through one of them, submerging my leg all the way to the upper thigh. I tried to get it out, but it was stuck, and my stake had fallen to the floor. I could hear deep breathing from somewhere behind, and I couldn't turn round to see what it was. My heart sank as the breathing got closer and closer, accompanied with that scuttling sound. The vampire shot past me. It was crawling on the walls, circling my position. It moved so fast and I was beyond terrified. I tried again to get my leg out of the hole in the stairs, but it was sunken so far that I just couldn't move it. I tried to shout for help, but nothing came out, only a whimper. The vampire landed in front of me and opened its mouth wide, showing off its hideous fangs. I tried to throw a punch, but it easily caught my fist and put its other hand on my shoulder. I closed my eyes and tried to think of something happy as I felt its cold breath on my face, but then something happened that I didn't expect. It screamed. I opened my eyes and saw that it looked to be in pain. It screamed again and jumped up to the ceiling, then scuttled away. Ben was holding up his crucifix, and Josh was right beside him. I had never been so happy to see anyone. They helped me out of the hole in the stairs, as they told me about how they had seen the vampire crawling upside down through one of the windows, and realized that I must have been in trouble. Luckily, Ben had had his crucifix on him and pressed it into the back of the vampire's head, just as it was about to bite me. We quickly got out of the Hoffman house and onto our bikes, then cycled back into town. I made an anonymous phone call to the police later on that night. They needed to know at least about the woman in the house. It was Halloween night, however, and even though I was careful not to use the word vampire and referred to it as a man, I don't know how seriously they would have taken my phone call. It makes me smile when I see Hollywood movies portraying vampires as handsome and charming. I know better. Every Halloween I think back to that night in 1985. The night that I almost died, and the night that my friend saved my life. That's not the part that really gives me chills though. The part that scares me is knowing that the vampire is still out there somewhere. Waiting in the shadows. Watching from the rooftops. Hunting in the night. And the next time, I might not get out alive.